So, picture this. It's 1497 and the King of Portugal is making a massive gamble, one of the most ambitious voyages in history, actually. He picks this tough navigator, Vasco da Gama, gives him 4 ships, and basically tells him to do the impossible, find a direct sea route to India. The goal? To get those incredible spices and completely cut out the middlemen who controlled the entire trade. I mean, this was a mission that, if it worked, was going to completely rewrite the map of global power.
And oh, did it work. The journey itself was absolutely brutal. They lost ships, more than half the crew died, but the spices they managed to bring back, they turned an almost unbelievable 3,000% profit. So yeah, this voyage wasn't just a success, it literally kicked open the door to a whole new age of global empire. But you know, the real story here isn't just about the money. We've got to dive into this, because what happened when these two worlds met for the very first time? It's this fascinating, kind of bizarre tale of cultural collision. So the question we have to ask is, was this really a heroic story of discovery? Or was it more of a cautionary tale about a massive, profound misunderstanding? Okay, so what was the actual game plan? Well, the mission really had 2 main goals. First, and most obviously, find that direct sea route to the spices. No more dealing with the powerful merchants controlling the land routes. And second, something you might not know, they were also looking for the legendary Christian kingdom of Prester John. They truly believed he was out there somewhere in the east and would be a huge ally in their rivalry with the Muslim world. But before they could even get close to India, they had their first major run-in with a culture that was completely unknown to them. This was on the coast of what is now South Africa, where they met the local Khoi people. And what started out as a pretty peaceful exchange of trinkets, well, it all went south and fast. If you look at this timeline, you can see just how quickly things fell apart. I mean, at first, it's all going by the book. They capture a local, treat him well, send him back, and that leads to a couple days of peaceful trade. No problem. But then a crewman named Fernão Veloso gets a little too curious. He decides to go off with some of the natives to see their village. A little while later, he comes sprinting back to the shore, screaming for help. When Da Gama's men go to rescue him, they get ambushed. Da Gama himself gets wounded. So yeah, this very first contact ended not with understanding, but with suspicion and bloodshed. After months and months of sailing, on May 20th, 1498, they finally see it. They drop anchor off their destination, the legendary port of Calicut in India. This was the moment they'd been dreaming of. They send a man ashore, actually a convicted criminal, to make that first contact. And what he heard next was, well, it was a total shock.
Yeah, instead of some exotic, unknown language, he's greeted in Castilian Spanish by a couple of Moors from Tunis. Just think about that for a second. You travel halfway around the world to find what you think is a new land, and the very first words you hear are a familiar curse in a language you understand. It was the stunning realization. This wasn't some isolated new world at all. It was a place that was already deeply, deeply connected to their own. So the Portuguese tell the Moors they're looking for Christians, and the Moors, trying to be helpful, take them to a large building that the Portuguese immediately assume is a church. And, wanting to be respectful, they follow what they think are the local customs. They pray outside the inner sanctuary, just noting that, okay, it seems only the priests are allowed inside. But here is where it gets really weird. They start looking at the art on the walls inside, and they're describing what they see as saints wearing crowns, except these saints had teeth sticking an inch out of their mouths and had 4 or 5 arms. You'd think a few alarm bells might have started ringing right about now, because of course this wasn't a church, and these people were not a lost tribe of Indian Christians. They were standing in a Hindu temple, watching Hindu rituals. And this one single, fundamental misunderstanding about religion, it was going to color every single interaction that came next. So, with this massive misconception firmly in their minds, Da Gama gets ready to meet the local ruler, the Zamarin of Calicut. The scene is incredible. He's carried in a palanquin through streets so jam-packed with people it was almost impossible to even move. The whole procession was this huge spectacle of drums, trumpets, and literally thousands of armed men. Finally, he gets to the Zamorin, and Da Gama, through his translator, makes this incredibly bold claim. He says he represents the King of Portugal, a lord of many countries whose wealth is greater than any king in India. But while he's saying all this,
He's looking at the Zamorin, who is just casually reclining on green velvet, spinning into a solid gold spittoon surrounded by these enormous silver basins. The casual, everyday opulence of this court was on a scale he had probably never even imagined.
Okay, so after all the speeches and formalities, it was time for the really crucial moment in diplomacy, the presenting of the gifts. This was Da Gama's big chance to prove his king's power and back up all those grand claims he just made. So, what did he bring to impress this incredibly wealthy ruler? Let's see. A few pieces of striped cloth, some hats, some coral beads, and a few household basics like sugar, oil, and honey. You can just feel the awkwardness, right? The massive disconnect between his boastful speech and this very humble pile of stuff. The Zamorin's officials didn't just reject the gifts, they laughed at them. They literally told Da Gama that the absolute poorest merchant from Mecca would offer something better than this. In fact, they flat out refused to even present this insulting offering to their king. Just like that, the diplomatic move went from hopeful to hostile. And the fallout from this diplomatic disaster? It was immediate. Da Gama wanted to leave, but he and his men very quickly realized they were in an incredibly dangerous spot. They were effectively trapped on shore by the very officials they had just insulted. Now, at first, it seemed like it might be okay. Da Gama actually went back to the king, who gave him his blessing and permission to return to his ships. You could almost hear the sigh of relief. It looked like the crisis was over. But when Da Gama tried to actually leave, the local officials completely stonewalled him. Despite the king's direct orders, they refused to give him the boats he needed to get from the shore back out to his fleet. And that's when their real plan became clear. The officials told Da Gama he could leave, sure, but only if he surrendered his ship's sails and rudders. The intention was obvious. They were going to immobilize the entire Portuguese fleet and take them all hostage. And that's exactly what happened. The situation hit its climax. Da Gama and a few of his men were locked inside a small courtyard, surrounded by more than 100 armed guards. Their lives, the mission, everything, it was all hanging by a thread. So how in the world did he get out of this? Well, Da Gama played a brilliant game of chess. The officials demanded he bring all of his trade goods ashore before they'd release him. So Da Gama agrees. He sends a letter to his brother back on the ship, but he only asks for a small sample of the goods to be sent over. Once that little token arrives, the officials think they've won the whole pot, and they let Da Gama go. The second he was safely back on his own ship, he called their bluff, ordered a complete stop to all shipments, and managed to escape the trap. So, you see, this historic first encounter between Portugal and India didn't end with some friendly trade deal and a handshake. No, it ended in a tense, hostile standoff, all of it built on a foundation of cultural ignorance and just one diplomatic blunder after another. And it leaves us with a really big question, doesn't it? How would this template, this pattern of seeking immense profit while being completely clouded by profound misunderstanding, how would that shape the next several hundred years of history between Europe and the East?